about to start proceedings, so I'd like to ask you for some hush, please.
And I'm going to play the Irish air Sliabh na Mon, and I understand where was this on Mel?
So, myself.
So especially for the Tipperary.
There's always a hiccup, and I'm the hiccup because my glasses are elsewhere at this minute and my notes. So I'm here to just quickly be the prelude to Michael Cox, who is going to read the letter from James Walsh, who didn't live in Waterford, but he lived in Tipperary, very close, as you know. And this letter is extremely poignant. He wrote it to his wife, Mary Walsh, who had been sent off to Van Diemen's Land as a convict. It's poignant because it may be one of the very, very few letters, certainly the only letter that I've seen, written by a husband to his wife who was sent out to Van Diemen's Land as a convict woman. And it gives us a whole different slant on the relationship between men and women in terms of those days and people who were sent out as convicts, and the ideas, as many people were told for generations, that they were whores and prostitutes. When you read this man's letter and when you hear it read to you today, I think you will all just have tears in your eyes. His words are incredible. He writes with such emotion. This is a broken-hearted letter that I send you because I cannot be there myself. I think of you day and night. And many lines like that, they just get you in the heart. And what happened was Mary Walsh was in a shop in town. She was looking at some material. Two women came in and they walked out with some cashmere hidden somewhere on their person. It was said that she was an accomplice. She did nothing. But she was an accomplice. And she was tried and she was sent out to Van Diemen's Land. Now her husband James wrote to asked 27 people within the township, including the mayor and 2 of the priests, to write on Mary's behalf, which they did. That did nothing. He paid the local tailor to write to the Lord Lieutenant and beg that Mary at least be held in a prison locally. That was not adhered to. She had been sent to the ends of the earth on the ship The Hope, which arrived in Hobart in 1842. She took with her her little child Mary, who was only 1 year old. She would have thought that at the very least she had one of her 3 children with her, and that child would be there, part of her family, with her forever. But she didn't know what was in store for her, because when she arrived, the child was taken from her and put in the orphan school. And when the letter arrives from her husband, which we feel she never received, He asks about how his little Mary is. He doesn't know that she has died because she died in the orphan school aged 3. So this letter is particularly emotional, I think, when you see the language that's used. You see how much the father cares for the children, how much he feels for the 2 sons that have been left behind, and how he's doing his very best to look after them in her absence, how much he misses his wife, and how much he misses their little baby child. And he's hoping upon hope that somehow or other Mary will be able to have enough money to bring him out so that he can join her out there. What we do know is that Mary has just vanished, and I would love it, and so would many other people love it, if we could find out Mary's history, because it comes to a dead end. Her record is wonderful, there's no blemishes on it, she gets her ticket of leave, she gets her certificate of freedom, and then she vanishes, completely vanishes. And we feel that she never got that letter because there's no creases in it. It was bought by Australia Post from an American collector and was bought because of the envelope. And when Australia Post received the envelope and opened it, they could not believe what was inside. And so, of course, the letter and the envelope now is in the collection at the Hobart Tasmania Museum and Art Gallery. And we know a little bit about family life from that letter, which I think is wonderful for us to know how much he cared for her, the husband. And James, he vanishes as well. You had the Great Famine. Did he die during that? There's no record of his burial. So we don't know what happened to him, and we don't know what happened to Mary. When she came out on the Hope, there were 2 Mary Walshes on that ship. The other Mary Walsh, we can follow her story, but our Mary Walsh, we can't. And I'm sure Michael's going to do amazing justice to that letter. I hope you've got your hankies with you.
My dear wife, I have received your kind and welcome letter, which is the greatest happiness I've enjoyed since the day I parted my dearest Mary. It gives me consolation to my troubled mind to know that you are comfortably situated in your exile, and that you have the great pleasure of seeing your sweet child at times. It would be the only wish of my heart, dear Mary, to go to you, even on my knees, but I have not the means at present, for I have to pay so much a year for our son Morris out of my wages. And as there is no emigration nor any provision made by government for that country, renders my state unable to go out to my lovely and dearest Mary. Therefore, if you could, by any means, make interest to bring me out, would be the only happiness in this life which I could desire. When you left Dublin, I sent Morris to the County Cork to my sister Mary, and I have not seen him those 12 months past, but I intend on tomorrow to go to see him. He is in good health, as I have received letters from him. I am sorry, my dear wife, that I did not leave my children go out with you, for I could be able to follow you in a short time if people carried out free as they were before. I would go out to you when I received your letter, but they are not without a great deal of money. If I lived for 100 years, you would be as fresh in my heart as you were the day you left me. I am glad to hear that my sweet little Mary is so well. My dear Mary, this is a broken-hearted letter I am sending you, as I cannot bring it myself. Send me word in your next letter if you intend to come home to me when your time is out, for I could not live at home without being in this place where my poor Mary used to be. My dear Mary, when I used to go to work every Monday morning from you, I would feel the week a year long until I would see you on Saturday evening. But what must my heart feel now when I cannot see you at all? Now, my dear Mary, as I am at the point of finishing my letter, farewell, farewell. May you receive as much consolation at reading this as I have the reading of yours. May your rest be calm, your dreams sweet, always thinking of him. who always thinks of you. Again, farewell until I can shake hands with my darling Mary, until death do us part. I remain your ever-loving and affectionate husband, James Walsh.
I think a pause is appropriate after that, just for a few seconds. A córide agus a gcuine úsle, is mór an honor agus pleasure dom fáilte a chur ribh, go léir anseo go dtí an leirlinn tróna inniuh. Thar ceann leirlinne agus an phobal SETU a gcuiteine, tá an áthas orm go bhféach am a chur ar fáil le bheitling. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Misha Terry O'Brien, and as Head of Library and Information Services here at SETU, it's my privilege and with a real sense of pride that I welcome you here this afternoon to Luke Wadding Library. Thank you, President Campbell, for making the time to join us, Your Excellency Ambassador Gray, Mayor Conway, members of the SETU Executive, colleagues and project partners, and of course our keynote speaker, Dr. Christina Henri. Today's launch is the culmination of many months and indeed years' work and collaboration between a wide range of partners internally within SETU, but also amongst external community partners. It has been a truly multi-layered and inclusive effort, comprising staff not just from within the library, but the Insight Research Group, Department of Computing and Mathematics, the SETU EDI team, Waterford Women's Centre, and the Roses from the Heart Waterford Group. I applaud and compliment the work of all those involved. With such a broad collective involved, it is perhaps unfair or even a little biased for me to highlight some specific members of the group, but I hope you'll indulge me if I particularly call out the work of Kieran Cronin, Special Collections and Public Outreach Librarian, who has driven this initiative and has been the glue that has held it all together. So thank you, Kieran, and indeed your team. Thank you, Kieran, and indeed your team, Lisa, John and Gillian, who are with us this afternoon, and indeed all the library and estate staff who have been involved in supporting the event here today. Also special thanks to Pat McInerney and Brenda O'Neill from the Inside Cooley Research Lab based here on the bottom floor of the library for all your support and the continuing growing collaboration that we have together. We really do appreciate it. So we have a really excellent schedule and quite a busy schedule this afternoon set out for you this afternoon with a variety of speakers and contributions, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. We're also live streaming and recording the event, and the Rose of the Heart collection has also just this morning been launched on the National Digital Repository of Ireland. It's also important to point out that this is not the end of this initiative. This is a live research project, so please do continue to follow its progress. I think that's enough for me for now. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon, and without further ado, I'd like to call on Uachtaráin na Hallscoile, President Veronica Campbell, to say a few words. Gormíle maith.
Your Excellency, Mayor and guests, it is my pleasure indeed to welcome you here to the Luke Wadding Library in SETU to launch what is a very special exhibition, Waterford's Roses from the Heart exhibition and photographic collection on the Digital Repository of Ireland. I'd like to extend a sincere thanks to Your Excellency, the Honourable Gary Gray, Australian Ambassador to Ireland, for joining us today. It's really a huge honour to have you with us here. The Roses of the Heart concept is truly a beautiful memorial to remember women from Ireland and Britain who were transported as convicts to Australia between 1788 and 1853. Through the creation of individual bonnets for every woman exiled, we acknowledge their existence, their stories and their resilience. Given the treatment of women at that time in our history and the nature of their departure from these shores, it's a group that we have known very little about until now. On initial viewing of the collection of handmade bonnets, it is both impactful and visually very beautiful. But I think the real beauty unfolds as we understand the basis for their creation and the individual stories of the women they commemorate. The bonnets we see today have a significant local focus. They represent the Waterford women who were transported to Australia for their misdemeanours. The importance is further enhanced by the fact that these bonnets have been made by local women from the Waterford Women's Centre and Ruth Murray's County Waterford Bonnet Making Group. Real display of absolute talent and ingenuity. Each bonnet represents the story of a woman, a mother, a sister, a daughter, an aunt, a friend, who was transported to Tasmania and New South Wales on a convict ship, most likely never to see her family or friends again. And for many, their misdemeanours were most likely futile. Expunction was an easy way to solve the issues of poverty and rehabilitation. Personally, I was intrigued by the choice of bonnet as the personalised memorial chosen. And on contemplation, I think it's a perfect tribute to the women of the time. The bonnet, a very simple item, was very much a woman's item of clothing, both decorative and practical in nature, and worn by women from all social classes. The style of the bonnet captured the era and is a rich and versatile symbol of womanhood at that time. What is equally special about this project is the process it follows. The creation of each individual memorial is part of a reflective activity, allowing those who made the bonnets to contemplate the story of each woman. The act of remembering these women and cherishing their stories is an excellent way to commemorate them and the contributions that they made to lives in Ireland and in founding a new nation in Australia. The recent celebration of International Women's Day and today's launch of the Roses from the Heart project are opportunities for us to ponder further the systematic gender inequality experienced by women in Ireland throughout our history. Sadly, gender inequality of this scale is not a relic of the past, but still pervades in some cultures today. And I hope that the sharing of these women's stories will inspire others to find the courage they need to begin again. SETU is absolutely delighted to support initiatives such as Roses from the Heart, as projects such as this educate, provoke thought, and create new conversations on gender equality and how we remember our past. This exhibition also opens a conversation for those who wish to find out more about their ancestors, where they came from, their families, and their journeys to Australia. It offers the opportunity for people to connect and share in a collective remembrance of a generation of women. I'd like to commend the wonderful Dr. Christina Henri for a truly wonderful concept and thank her for her unwavering commitment to the project, which has an immense cultural importance for both Australia and Ireland. I'd also like to thank Councillor Joe Conway, Mayor of the City and County of Waterford, for being with us here today and for your ongoing support, Mayor. The Roses from the Heart Waterford Group, who have driven the project in Waterford, and the Waterford Women's Centre and Ruth Murray's County Waterford Bonnet Making Groups for the extensive work and expertise that you have done in creating these beautiful memorials. And for today's event, I'd like to thank Cathy Desmond for her moving recital and Michael Cox for his reading of an extract of A Letter to Mary, really beautiful and moving. And to the SETU Library team who've organised today's launch and have given enormous support to the project, Terry O'Brien and Kieran Cronin, thank you for your commitment and your huge energy for the project. And as Terry had mentioned, I'm really delighted to say that the exhibition starts here today in Waterford, and we're delighted that it will travel to our campuses also in Carlow and Wexford in the coming months to share the beautiful memorials and the story that they represent. And it's wonderful to think that this is going to be shared across our SETU staff and student community. So thank you all for everything you've done to make today come to pass, and I wish everybody a really enjoyable afternoon with us here. Thank you.
Where do we begin? I don't think I see any fellow councillors, so I think I'm excused from addressing fellow councillors. But notwithstanding that, President Campbell, excellently, Ambassador Gray, and all the other distinguished guests that we have here today, it is indeed har bheith priviléideach domsa bheith mór golúdar an seo ar an iarnán seo, agus má cheansa thuirteteach an argóint agus a chás seo an cás nach raibh mór an ólas a gom faoi go dtí seo. I have to say that I've come to this project late enough in the day, and I'm just absolutely agog with all that has been unveiled here today and in the preamble to it. And it reminds me, as I was sitting there listening to the story, it reminds me of that song, Where Do I Begin? And I think the first thing that I have to say is I have to thank our actor, Michael, for re-enlivening the letter of James Walsh. And as a former primary school principal, I had to begin to do my sums, and it was circa 1842, and he's writing this letter so flowingly. And at the same time, the national school system didn't come into existence until 1829. So if he has 3 children, he's unlikely to be of an age where he could have benefited from the national school system. But yet, he wrote this very, very moving letter and wrote it so well. And then it's just something that makes the raw, what would you call it, genuineness of the letter so stark and so emotive. And thank you for that. It was so well done. When we're thinking about Western Australia, and I was talking to Ambassador Gary just as we were sitting there, and we both pretty well instantly struck up an infatuation about a book that he read and I'm ploughing through at the moment, called the Catalpa Rescue, and it details a daring escape from what's now the Fremantle prison in Western Australia by convicted Fenians at the time. And it just, every day almost that passes, you're reminded of the inextricable connection that we have between Australia and Ireland. And this is just another demonstration, another facet of it today. And it's interesting that the theme is roses from the heart, 2 eternal symbols of love, the roses and the heart. And I think that it's going to be a poignant reminder of the history of the 2 countries and the absolutely egregious victimization of the people that were put away to penal colonies for the most menial of offences. And that is, I suppose, the legacy of colonization that we all have, and that probably stalks the land a bit even to this day. So my council staff gave me some speaking notes just to make sure at my age I don't forget things. So I'm going to just glance over them, and there are people that I have to say well done to. First of all, Veronica and her library staff, and all involved in putting this on for Waterford, which not alone redounds on the university itself, but it also reflects very well on us as a city and county that I represent, that we can have this pathos, this affinity with the past, and put it on show for the wider world. The bonnet from the heart, the roses from the heart. Christina, who spoke earlier, and the artist-in-residence, that she is the Cascade Female Factory historic site in Tasmania, the visionary that is driving this wonderful project. And we have reminders. I didn't know that 300 convicted women were transported to Tasmania. We heard the instance there of Mary for a case of unjustified punishment, and many were sent away for the most insignificant crimes that they were presumed and made to feel guilty about. So, Peter go bhfuil ma cheansa ráite agam. That's pretty much all I want to say, but I'm delighted to see the radiant bonnets here in front of me. I'm delighted to see that this is coinciding roughly with International Women's Day, which we celebrated in Waterford and around the county last week. And I think it's a very, very wonderful project that gives an exhibition of the durability of the human race, of womanhood, of the people who withstood the awful, the outrageous injustices that were inflicted on them in penal times and prior to the famine, but in post-famine as well. And, you know, the resilience of the Irish vis-a-vis the Australian race and the great interconnectivity that we celebrate between us. And I hope that the exhibition, the project, has a great success going forward, and that I'm very privileged to be here to represent the people of Waterford City and County as partakers in it. So go ganairi go galliv, Tom Harve buiach div osan privilege vehan shaw, and thank you very much for your kind attention. God bless you all.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like now to invite His Excellency, the Ambassador to Australia, to say a few words, please.
Thank you. Joe, thank you. And Christina, thank you for the incredible contribution that you have made to uncovering the humanity and the connection between our country, Australia, and this wonderful island. Kathy, thank you for the beautiful music before we began today's proceedings. You know, the history of this movement of people as part of whether it be transportation or whether it be the Earl Grey scheme, whether it be free settlers, or the other systems that were in play, is important to the creation of our country. By any other name, it's colonisation. And colonisation creates its own misery and suffering. In Ireland, we know that. Remarkably, in Ireland, the only head of state to apologise to our First Nations people for the injustice of colonisation is the head of state of Ireland. Michael D. Higgins did that in our Parliament in 2017. It's a beautiful speech. It goes to the treatment of Aboriginal Australians at the hands of settlers and colonisers, many Irish, and it addresses that issue. No other head of state, not ours, no other head of state has made that apology. The women whom we observe today create the most incredible legacy. In 2 weeks, there'll be an election in Tasmania for our Premier of Tasmania. The lead candidate at this point in time is a woman called Rebecca White. Should Rebecca be elected, and I hope she is, she will be a woman Premier elected in her own right. But wonderfully for Tasmania, she won't be the first woman Premier. Tasmania is a successful, wealthy state. Tasmania is a state that understands its heritage, and Tasmania is a place that benefited from your blood and from your heritage, planted as it was in circumstances as inhumane as those described, with young women, young girls and older women described by the garrisons that held them in control in ways that were inhuman and on many occasions simply wrong. But boy, they created a state of which I'm proud, and they become part of the heritage of our country and a link to your country that can never be broken. Thank you, Christina.
Thank you once again, Excellency. I'd now like to invite Christina Henri, Dr. Christina Henri, to the stage for her keynote address. So whenever you're ready, Christina, we're happy to have you again. Thank you.
Just have to get something. Looks like I'm settling in. Thank you so much, everybody, for inviting me today, and thank you very much to the President, who I believe is the first President female here, Professor Veronica Campbell, to our Mayor Joe Conway, and to the Australian Ambassador to Ireland, Gary Gray. What a privilege to listen to all of you speak, and I'm sure everyone was moved by the words that were being said. I realise some of you will know about my story, so I'm going to apologise if you've heard it before, because I'm making a presumption that some of you don't. So I'm going to start at the beginning of how it all happened for me. I was a mature age student. I was studying at the University of Tasmania, and we had a subject there called the historical landscape, and I thought that sounded really, really interesting, and I decided I would do it. Went over about a period of 8 weeks. Took us all round Hobart. It was mainly in relation to the colonial settlement of Tasmania. Tasmania became Tasmania in 1856. Prior to that, it was called Van Diemen's Land from 1803, which is when white settlement happened in Van Diemen's Land. So I went to this module, and the very last week we went onto a site called the Cascades Female Factory, which sits at the sort of the bottom of Mount Wellington in a valley. Now, the interesting thing about it for me was that I had never heard of the site before, wasn't very far out of town, and you had to actually drive past the sandstone walls that surrounded the site every time you went to the local municipal tip. So I had actually driven past those sandstone walls on quite a number of occasions. But we have a lot of sandstone walls around Hobart, and I hadn't sort of wondered to myself what was particularly different about that site to any other of the sites, and so I didn't know the story. The story was never mentioned in our household, and I had got a scholarship to go to a private girls' school for my secondary education, and I'm suspecting that they were never going to teach us about these particular women and their stories. So as a mature age student, I went onto the Cascades Female Factory site, and for the very first time learnt about 12,500 women who'd been transported out to Van Diemen's Land. And that was only half the number, because there was around 25,566 that were transported out to Australia. So you either were sent to New South Wales, but then that closed down in 1840, and then you were sent on to Van Diemen's Land. So the class left halfway through the day, and I stayed behind, and I just looked around what was there. And what was there at the time were the sandstone walls, and not all of them, just part of the walls. There was an archaeological dig, which was showing you 2 cells in the ground, and that was about the size of a person's body, and that space that they might have had. And that was it. But there was a more modern building there that was a fudge factory with a unit attached to it so that someone could live there. There was another piece of land next door that at that stage didn't belong to the Cascades Female Factory, and there was a cottage there that had been rented out or owned over a number of years by different people. And it no one had actually realised that was part of the whole site. Of course, later they did understand it was the matron's cottage. And so that land was acquired and is now part of the whole site. If you go to visit there, you'll see it. But that was it. That was what you had to tell you the story of the life of a large number of women. And Mayor, you mentioned it in your speech. You were talking about lifting the veil, unveiling. And really, there'd been a veil of amnesia over this story for a very, very, very long time. It had been suppressed. It had been suppressed in my family because I went onto the site in 2003, and it wasn't until 2010 that I found out that I had female convicts in my family. I thought I was doing this project for everyone else. I had no idea I was actually caught up in the story, because how would I know when no one had ever spoken about it? At school we did get one afternoon in our history on the Aboriginal population, of which we were told there were no more in Tasmania. They'd all died with Truganini, we were told. We were told about convict men. They'd built the bridges, the roads, they'd done all the heavy construction, there'd been chain gangs, and we learnt all terrible things about them, but nothing about a woman. And I wasn't really of an age where I would start to think, well, were there convict women? I didn't have that thought. And so I'd gone through, to a mature age student in my life and not known anything. So I went back and I said, look, I'm training to be an artist. Maybe there's some way I can use art to give meaning to this story, to give it a different channel, to get people who might not read the research papers or read historic novels to learn about the story that's obviously so important to us. And so they said, oh yay, you can come and be our Honorary Artist-in-Residence. And I thought, well, that sounds nice. And I said to myself, I'll give it 3 years. 3 years. Well, just so you know, this is my 21st year and it's not stopping anytime soon. So when I first started there, I was trying to get to the story, and I was thinking, well, there are no convict women alive now. I can't just pop over to Joan and chat to her and say, how was it? Because, they're no longer there. So I sent letters around Australia, and I wrote and I asked people if they were related, if they were descended from a convict woman, could they please send me pieces of their hair? Could they send me their hand imprints? And when I was doing this, I actually had to apply as if I was doing a scientific work. I said, I'm just using this for an artistic expression. I'm not actually going to do anything scientific with the hair or the hand imprints, but, I still had to get the clearance that I could use it as part of my work. I didn't know if anyone would send me anything, and I was quite surprised to get the amount of hair that came in all sorts of different forms. Some people sent me whole plats of hair. It was amazing. And the hand imprints. So one of the things I did was, to start with, I did frottage of the walls. I went round and I copied the walls. And then I superimposed the hand imprints on the walls of the descendants of these convict women. Because I was trying to think, well, maybe they railed against the wall, maybe they leant against the wall, maybe they hit the wall, maybe they had something to do with the wall, maybe they touched the wall. And I did all sorts of things with the hair, because the hair was a big thing for women back then. Your hair spoke about your femininity, it was important, the length of your hair was important as a woman. And one of the punishments for women was to cut their hair off. And it wasn't as though you were going to a nice hairdresser, like some of you have today. Where's, yes, beautiful hairstyle there, just been beautifully cut. No, it'd be the shears. And these women went into hysterics, we're told, when their hair was cut off. And some of them had the fortitude to actually scoop up the hair. And when they put on a bonnet, they worked the hair into a plait so that it looked as though they still had their hair. Because this is one of the things that showed that they were a convict woman if they didn't have long hair. That was an easy way to say, oh, that woman's a convict woman. Look, her hair's been cut off. So I did all sorts of artistic things with the hair. And I wasn't sure where I was going with all of this. And one day I went to a heritage museum in Battery Point, which is not very far away from the site. They knew what I was doing, that I was the artist-in-residence at the Female Factory. And they showed me their costume collection, which was magnificent, and it was pretty much all of the era of when the convict women came out. And then I'd finished looking at those costumes, and they said, oh, you might be interested in this. And they took me to another room. It was just a small room. It was really, well, it could have been a big cupboard, really. And it had shelves on either side as I walked in, and there were oblong boxes. They were like this, about yay deep, white. And I lifted the lid, and honestly, I just nearly dropped the lid, because held in the confines of the tissue was a number of bonnets that looked like that, looking at me with the tissue there, and it was like looking at the face of a baby because they were held in place. And that struck me so much. It took me a few days to come to terms with it, and I thought, really, I have to use the baby's bonnet, the christening bonnet, as an expression of the grief of the mothers who lost their babies at the site, of which at the time we thought there were around about 900. And I used the artistic licence of, well, this is a piece of art, so I'm going to go with that number. It may or may not be the right number, but it's a number, and it speaks to the fact that children died here through no fault of their own nor no fault of the mother. And so that started the process with the bonnets. And I think it's relevant to tell you the story about how that went, because I applied for some funding and was very fortunate to get it. I got enough calico to make 900 bonnets. I cut the pattern, added ribbon and some ties, and packaged up and added a letter and sent it off around Australia. And I said, well, Sarah Jane, if you want to make a bonnet, please make one. I said, why? And then I said, if you're not interested, you haven't got time, you don't sew, maybe you'd like to pass this on to someone else who you think might be interested. Now, I had a very short window of opportunity because the funding had only come in January, and I wanted to have this event on the 8th of March on International Women's Day at the Female Factory. So I wasn't giving myself a lot of time. Meanwhile, I'd bought polystyrene balls. I had stockings that I'd sourced from all the community shops. I put the stockings over the polystyrene balls, had to make holes in the polystyrene balls to fit the wooden doweling in that then went to the ground so that they could be placed in the ground. Have you ever tried putting a hole in a polystyrene ball? It's not actually a lot of fun. And I was helped by somebody who had a machine, and they drilled the holes for me, which was just saved my life, really, because I was making a big mess of it. So, you know, I'm waiting and waiting to see if any bonnets come back, and 1,800 came back. So, and I do have pictures with me today if you're interested to come and look later, and I'll show you. I could have two different installations. I could have the 900 bonnets on the polystyrene balls, and I could have 900 bonnets in a different place, in a different way on display, but to still tell the same story. So on the 8th of March, there was a television crew from the mainland came over, and they'd said, we'll only come and follow you round if you'll only have us. You can't have anyone else, can't have any other television crew, no one else, just us. And they were well known, and I said, okay, I'll just go with you. So it was about 8 o'clock in the morning. I actually slept at the site overnight, and the next morning I'd already marked out the holes in the ground where the wooden doweling was going, because I'd shaped it in the shape of a cross. So I knew where each piece of doweling was going, and I put the first piece of doweling in that had the bonnet over the polystyrene head. And the minute I did that, the minute it became a baby. Like that, this is no longer a bonnet to me. This represents that baby. And that baby, you know, lived a short life. This lovely bonnet's been made by someone called Jane Griffin, and it's just exquisite. So the minute that wooden dowling went into the ground, the skies opened up, it poured with rain. First thing I did was think, well, that's the tears of the women, the mothers, coming down onto these babies. I ran into the shop and got a green garbage bag and made a hole, and there I was putting the rest of the installation up before the dignitary came to help open the event. And then I think this will also touch you, because you being Irish know what singing does. You know, music is so important, and so I always try and incorporate music within what I do with the bonnets. And so at the end of the day, people had gone home. They'd all had to put up umbrellas. I'd organised a cherry picker, so we had overhead photography, and you can see these umbrellas. You see the white bonnets, the green grass, the confines of the wall, and in the background the Mount Wellington. And the installation was put very, very close to the site that had been a chapel at the female factory. And suddenly there was only 3 women left. And again, I'm looking at you, Joan, because you're wearing black today, and the woman was about your age. In fact, she looked a little bit like you. She could have been you. Can you sing?
Used to.
Right, well, this lady's name was Jill, and she could sing. So there were these 3 women wearing black, and they were walking around, very slowly walking around the cross of bonnets, and they started singing an Irish lullaby. Well, that was it for me. Still is. Just really, you know. And this is what happens when you use something beautiful to tell a stark story. You don't need to use something terrible to tell a stark story. It's already cruel enough. Use something beautiful, and it just allows us to move into the story and feel for that mother who lost that child. The mother who, after the child had died, was put into a cell and given bread and water for a day because she hadn't kept her space tidy because her child had just died. Not long after that, I decided that I should have a bonnet for every one of the women. So I went back to the site where I'd been inspired with the baby's bonnet, and I chose a bonnet which was a servant's bonnet. Now, as it turns out, this is the exact bonnet that the women used to wear, because there's a photo on the wall at the Kilmainham jail, and I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it's amazing. And it shows the women walking in line, and we've used that photograph in some of our imagery. And they're wearing that exact bonnet. So this bonnet is the right bonnet, but it was the right bonnet for me because I needed a brim, because I wanted the name of the woman on the brim. That was the most important thing, was the convict woman's name, and then the ship and the year she arrived out in Australia. I could probably talk for a very long time, and there isn't time to do that, but what I will share with you is just a few little things. One is what a bonnet means to me. So a bonnet is really important to me, and I have these events called a blessing of the bonnets, which is to show people how important that bonnet is, that if someone presents me with a bonnet, it's going to be cherished. So sometimes a blessing of the bonnet might involve just one family, and other times it could involve 600 people or more in a cathedral or somewhere else. I have them anywhere. It could be at a site that's relative to the heritage story, it could be in a large cathedral, it could be just on a beach. It just depends. So blessing of the bonnets are really important to me. Now, a lot of bonnets tell stories, and I just wanted to show you this bonnet because you'll look at it and you'll think, well, you know, it's a bonnet. I don't know what you think when you see it, but I'll tell you what it is. This bonnet was made by Anne Winder. Anne Winder lives on Jersey. She doesn't live in Ireland, but she has the same heart you all have. You know, she made this bonnet, although it wasn't her story, she made it because she felt empathy for these women. She made this bonnet for Bridget Welsh while she was sitting in a hospital room beside her husband while he was dying. She told me that it was the only thing that kept her going. She said, making the bonnet for Bridget, whose life had been so much harder than her husband and her life. They'd lived happy lives. She would have been in her 70s. I guess her husband was a slimmer age. She said, this woman didn't have what I've had. I've had happiness. And thinking about her hard life and how she had the endurance to keep going when she got out to Australia helped her through that really, really, really hard time when she was sitting next to her husband as he was getting sicker and sicker. She used his shirt and she used his tie. This lass, this is a bonnet I made. Well, that's not quite true. I didn't actually make this bonnet. This bonnet was made by a lady, Jean Rolls. She was an older lady, like me, and she made this bonnet in 2015. Now, it was just this fabric, just that fabric. It didn't have a name on it, it didn't have anything on it, it had no embellishments. It was just the bonnet. And when she gave it to me, I looked at it and it didn't speak to me. I couldn't think, how can I make this bonnet the bonnet it should be for somebody if it's coming from me? Because it had no name on it, so somebody was going to be naming it. And the somebody turned out to be me. But Jean made this in 2015, and now it's 2024 and I've only just finished this bonnet. I just saw a piece of material one day and I thought, yep, that's the start of that bonnet. And so it went. And I'm going to tell you, and I line my bonnets, but I'll tell you why I line them. Because my sewing is so terrible. I have to hide my stitches. So, you know, I do line my bonnets. And the bonnets have pockets. So you can put little stories in there or little notes or... I have a group who meets each week, and in fact some of them might be watching today. They meet with me in New Norfolk. We've been meeting since COVID for 4 years now. And they're the most eclectic group of women, and they make gorgeous bonnets, all of which are on display over there in terms of Waterford women, so please do come and have a look later. But one of the ladies makes cards, made this beautiful little card, makes these cards, and we can pop them in the bonnet. So I'm just going to refresh my memory because, you know, there are 25,566 women and I know I should know them all off by heart. I wish I did because they're all meaningful. But Ellen, I've told her that 2 people created her bonnet, and I've said that I'm so sad that she died far away from home because she was sent out. She was 26 years old. She was a widow with a child. I can't see that she brought the child out with her. It said that she stole some cashmere. And she was sent out on the John Calvin, which is the ship on here, in 1828 to Van Diemen's Land. So 1828. So she'd been out for a while, but in 1852 she was recommended for a conditional pardon. And the next year she's dead. She died in the local hospital. And I don't know anything about her in terms of did she marry, did she have children when she was in Van Diemen's Land? Is there anybody who knows about her and cares about her? But I wanted to know that somebody does. So I've written her this little letter. And that's what all these bonnets are about. And I'd like to commend, I think Jenny is in the audience. Jenny, can you put your hand up, please? Jenny, I know you're a student here and you've made the most beautiful bonnet. You've made the most beautiful bonnet for Jane Armstrong. And I believe that you chose to make the bonnet for Jane because she had lived in Wexford and moved to Waterford. And you had lived in Wexford and moved to Waterford. And I think that's the wonderful choice. And I love the way that you've chosen her. And when you go downstairs, if you haven't already been downstairs to look at the installation, have a look at Jenny's bonnet. It's down there. It's exceptionally beautiful. Exceptionally beautiful. Thank you. I think every bonnet is beautiful. Some of the bonnets could be as plain, but it's got the name of the woman on it, and it was made with caring and love from somebody who was thinking about them as they stitched the bonnet. That's what this project is about. When you go downstairs and look at the bonnets, you'll be moved by all of them. If you look at the bonnets here, and I go to pains to tell people that these are the work of people who've been making bonnets for 4 years. So over 4 years they've just blossomed in how they're making the bonnets. And they're all different. You know, someone is a lace maker, someone is an embroiderer, someone is a seamstress, someone barely could even sew to start with. And the bonnet is beautiful and it tells the story. So, Professor, you mentioned the bonnets, and I chose a bonnet because, as you said, every woman back then wore a bonnet. So I felt it was important that I had some symbolism that connected with the convict woman that they all absolutely had. They all wore a bonnet. And as you said, if you're in the lower classes, your bonnet would be simple. If you were in the upper classes, your bonnet would be ornate and possibly made by a convict woman, many of whom were lace makers and embroiderers and skilled seamstresses. So that's why I chose the symbolism of the bonnet. But I called the project Roses from the Heart because, you know, you call women here the Irish rose. You know, in England they say the English rose, you know. And you have the Rose of Tralee. That's still going on in Australia. And I think it's still going on here, is that right? You know, so you think of a rose, you think of something special, you think of love, you think of a woman. And all I could think of was most of those women weren't given roses. Let's give them one. So we called it, you know, Roses from the Heart, and because it's coming from either love, which is shown every day by ancestors to their descendants. I know that there are ancestors watching, descendants watching from Australia. There's a lady called Kathy Salinger who'd be watching for Anne Anderson, and there's Heather Mutiner who would be watching for her Bridget. Yes, Bridget Scanlon. And they just love their ancestor who was sent out. And so to me a rose is very special because we are giving a rose on behalf of that woman to that woman. We're giving it to thank them for all that they contributed to in that new nation that they moved to. It's now the country where I can live freely, I can be the person I want to be, I have the opportunity to go to university and study. I was the first one in my family too. And then my brother, who was a genius, was the next one. And, you know, we're just so fortunate. My lass came from Dublin. She didn't come from Waterford. She came out in 1796. Her name was Mary Monks. And I wish I'd met her. And every time I come to Ireland, this is my 10th visit now, I wish I could speak Gaelic Irish, because I would have loved to have been able to understand everything you said as you were saying it. I think it should have just come down in the DNA. I should just be able to, you know, I should be able to. But I would like to hand this rose over to you, Professor, as a symbol. And thank you all very much, and especially the biggest thank you to the crew here, to you, to your staff who are unbelievable. I mean, Pat, John, Kieran, my goodness. Just extraordinary people who will be friends forever. And to the group, the Roses from the Heart Waterford Group that we formed last year, every single person in that group.
Thank you very much, Christina.
So moving, beautiful. Thank you.
Okay, before we proceed, I think we need to take some more photographs, so I could ask for your patience, forbearance for another minute or two. Before we do that, could I just again, on behalf of everybody here, thank Christina for her amazing talk this afternoon. It was... She didn't just tell us her story, she shared her story with us, and the story of these women sent to Australia, or deported to Australia and Tasmania. It was at times poignant, emotional, heartbreaking, sad, but empathetic above all, and also I think a story of resilience. So thank you so much. We will have some more speakers shortly. If I could just ask, as I said, for your forbearance for another minute or two. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, invitation, yes. structure and as a space. We'll get going again anyway.
Sit down again now, Terry.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I want to start getting it. Yeah, do now. We're ready to go. No, the mic isn't working. That's where the webcam, or that's where the live stream is. They will, because that's where the mic was not turned on. If the mic was on, it would double back. Okay, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. Sorry, it's not like a library to try and shush people in a library, but thank you again for your patience. We're now going to enter into the final phase of this afternoon's session. So I'm now going to call on Dr. Alison Keneally, Vice President for Equality, Diversity and Inclusion from SETU, to say a few words. Alison, thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Your Excellency, Mayor of Waterford, President Campbell, Dr. Christina Henri. I don't know how I'm going to follow you, but I'm going to try. Fellow speakers, guests, colleagues, students, I'm just so honoured, really, to be here today at the launch of this absolutely fantastic Waterford Roses of the Heart exhibition. And I suppose, you know, we celebrated International Women's Day last Friday, and I couldn't think of a more appropriate way, really, to mark that day than the event here today. And the theme for International Women's Day this year was Inspire Inclusion. And I think, you know, the event here today certainly makes me reflect on inclusion, but more specifically exclusion. And I think themes like exclusion and migration, which unfortunately were really central to the experience of many Irish people, and particularly Irish women throughout history, are ones which are really relevant to this project. And forced migration and exclusion is something that the more than 350 Waterford women who were transported to Tasmania and New South Wales in Australia between 1788 and 1853, they knew more about it than most. And I think for me, one of the most poignant and powerful things really about today's event is the link between the women of the past and the women of the present, all of whom we celebrate here today. And the bonnets, I think, is a really symbolic link between that past and present, the women of the past and the women of the present coming together. I think the event here today and this fantastic work, and this collection, it shows us the power of women coming together. Women's lives entwined through fabric, through letters, women coming together and working across continents and across generations to seek to acknowledge the wrongs of the past, and I suppose to seek to right them in so much as we can in the present day. As educators, we know that history is always incomplete. We never know the full truth. We know and acknowledge that our understanding of history is sometimes based on very narrow perspectives and narrow narratives, from which women and other minority groups were very often excluded. For too long, Irish women, their experiences, their perspectives and their narratives have been, in the words of the great poet Evan Boland, they've been outside history. I think it is important to remember, and I remember here today, that history and the past are two very different things. History, of course, is the official version of events that it's recorded and that we are taught about and we learn about. But the past is something very different entirely. The past is where most people's lives took place. The past is where we remember our lives and remember family members and small incidents. The past is where ordinary lives were lived. The past is where the lives of these women we celebrate today here were lived. And I think that beautiful letter that we had at the start, summarises that so well. So today we come together to celebrate that past and those lives. And while we cannot change the past, we must learn from it, so as not to repeat the same mistakes again. We must now be committed through our work and our actions to ensure that we do not exclude, unintentionally or otherwise, the voices and perspectives of women from our current society. We must also actively work to meaningfully include those with disabilities, members of migrant or refugee communities, our LGBTQ+ community, Black or ethnic minority members of our communities in our present day discourses, so our society becomes more equal and inclusive for present and future generations. So I will leave you today to reflect on the words of one of the great Irish poets, Evan Boland, in one of her most beautiful and well-known poems, and that is Outside History. And from the moment I heard about the event, this poem just came to my mind, so I'd love to, if you indulge me for one more minute, I'll share it with you. There are outsiders always. These stars, these iron inklings of an Irish January, whose light happened thousands of years before our pain did. They have always been outside history. They keep their distance. Under them remains a place where you found you were human, and a landscape in which you knew you were mortal, and a time to choose between them. I have chosen. Out of myth into history, I move, to be part of that ordeal whose darkness is only now reading me from those fields, those rivers, those roads, clotted as firmaments with the dead. How slowly they die as we kneel beside them. We whisper in their ear, and we are too late. We are always too late. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. That was a really appropriate and beautiful poem. Thank you. And thanks for all your support and in fact, all of the SETU EDI office as well. And indeed, my own VP, David Deneef, Head of Student Experience. Thanks for all your support. We really do feel it, and it is very real, and we thank you both for that. We're now going to hear from some of the people involved, some of the women involved in the project. So next up to the stage, I'd like to call Anne Fitzgerald from the Roses of the Heart Waterford Group, please.
So, Anne Fitzgerald is my name, and I'm a member of the Roses of the Heart Waterford Group. And we only started really in June last year when we got together and formed this group that we have now, because all our lists and all our names and everything was a little bit all over the place, and I just felt that we needed to organise ourselves, and we needed to. Sorry, Kieran, I'm diverting from what I'm supposed to be saying. I only came up here to thank everyone, but as you're sitting there, you think of those things. And we're really excited about this launch today. We put a lot of work into it, and we're very delighted it's part of International Women's Programme for SETU. And we're really looking forward to our photographic collection and supporting information becoming live on the Digital Repository of Ireland in collaboration with the SETU, I was warned not to say SETU, SETU Library. It's a really long overdue acknowledgement of the history and the lives of Waterford convict women. So as I said, I want to introduce my colleagues and the people that I worked with, and I know some of them have been thanked already. And thank you, Christina, for coming all the way to talk as a keynote speaker from Australia. I'd like to thank Terry O'Brien and his staff at SETU Library, in particular Kieran Cronin, John Maloney for his graphic design, Gillian O'Neill, Lisa Power. I'm here to see you with these glasses. Pat McInerney for sharing your expertise and photography skills in digitising and recording the bonnets. From the group, I'd like you to introduce you to Ruth Murray, here in the front row, Ruth Murray, and Margaret Richards, the curators of the beautiful bonnet exhibition that you'll get an opportunity to see in a little while. And I just want to say about Margaret Richards, she knows every single woman and me and Margaret met every Saturday last summer to put master lists together, because that is critical to this project. Having master lists and knowing, who needs bonnets made for them, who's made, everything has to be written down. So dare you get a name wrong, and Margaret would know. Roger and Joan Johnson, who is the conveyor of Newtown School Archives, is in our group. Anne Cusack, for your generous and continuous support. Where's Anne? Is over there? Oh, there's Anne. Brian O'Donnell couldn't make it today, but he made the beautiful bonnet stands at Newtown School. Also from the group, Eleanor Murphy and Patty Brown and myself, we work on the research and on the project, and there is some very important research being done and commitment to discovering the genealogical origins of these water women. And we've already found some. We found some connections, through our research. To Kathy, thank you for the beautiful music. And to Michael, fresh from the Dr. Mary Strangman play, which we went to see. And it was absolutely excellent. Where was I now? We would like to thank all the groups, local, national and internationally, for your contributions in making bonnets for the project. A special welcome to Liz Power, coordinator of Water Women's Centre, who joined our group recently, and we're delighted about that. The Water Women's Centre has been instrumental in supporting the work of the project, and we're delighted to continue this collaboration. And a special thanks to Breathe Murphy, because when I came to Breathe in 2016 and said, we should get on board with this project, and she introduced it as one of the programmes, didn't you? Yeah, so we... And how about saying greetings and welcome to all those watching on live stream. Heather Mortimer from Australia, the great-great-granddaughter of one of our Waterford convict women, Bridget Scanlon. And she's the first Australian woman to make contact with us. And that was from Eleanor's research. The bonnet was on the window in the Women's Centre. She contacted us, and we have built up a lovely relationship with her, and she has sent us a lot of information about Bridget Scanlon. We actually found her in Stradbally. Her family came from Stradbally. So. Hello to Valerie Lappin-Ganley from Pacifica, California. Valerie has Waterford connections, and her great-grandparents were the first Jewish couple to get married in Waterford. She also contacted us and is now making bonnets in California. So, hello, where's home? Catherine Salonga, Perth, Australia. Her fourth great-grandmother was Anne Anderson, 1821 from Waterford. And I actually found one Anderson family in Waterford in 1789. So, and we believe that must be the Anderson. me and Kieran are hoping to do more research on the Anderson family, but we found one Anderson family, and we believe that that's the family. To all the women in Christina's group who made bonds for Waterford convicts in Tasmania, and they actually meet in a building that's built by convicts. Isn't that right? Am I okay with me 5 minutes? On a personal level, I got an opportunity to gain a Bachelor of Arts degree in Community Education and Development as a mature student through SETU and the Women's Centre. And as an early school leaver, this opened many doors for better opportunities for me. It has given me the confidence to stand here today and make it possible to follow up my passion for women's history, research and genealogy. And I'd love to welcome the community development students. Where are you? Oh, there you are. I know you'll get as good opportunities as I did, and very best luck with your studies. I was lucky. The convict women did not have such opportunities. They just had a strong will to survive, and their crime was poverty. In the organising, just finish off by saying, in the organising of this event, we put a lot of work into it. But all the way along, we'd often hear saying, you know, that's serendipity. It was like it was meant to come together. And it's like the spirit of those convict women are behind us to make this event happen. And I just want to say a little thing about the beautiful gesture that Veronica put down the rose beside the bonnet made by Jenny, and Jenny is a SETU student, so it celebrates the collaboration between the Roses from the Heart and SETU. And I bought in that candle. Sorry, Cynthia, I'll bring it back later on. I took it in my drawer. I bought in that candle because it represents the light. The convict women are here with us in spirit, and it's a representation of the heart, the roses from the heart. So enjoy the rest of the event, and thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Anne. That was really inspiring, really passionate, and your enthusiasm really shines through. And don't worry, you're not the first person to say SETU, and you won't be the last, dare I say it. People often wonder what goes on in university. What does research mean? What does research look like? So research isn't always done in a laboratory. It's not always high-tech EU funding. This is real research based in the community, based on real people's lives writ large. So thank you very much for capturing that, Anne, in your words. Next up, I'm going to call on Brenda O'Neill, who is one of my colleagues here in SETU, Director of Inside Cooley Research Lab. So Brenda, please, when you're ready. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Your Excellency, President Campbell, the Mayor, distinguished guests and everyone here. It's really nice to be part of this event. I'm greatly honoured to be in such company. I'm a lecturer in the Department of Computing and Mathematics, and I'm also a PhD student, and as Terry said there, I'm Director of the Inside Cooley Research Lab, so that keeps me out of a lot of mischief. The Cooley Research Lab, just to tell you a little bit about it, was founded because of the donation of the contents of the Professor Michael Cooley's study to the university by the Cooley family. And this was facilitated by Dr. Larry Stapleton. And the lab is a collaboration between the Department of Computing and Maths and the Luke Wadding Library. And I'll just tell you a little bit about Michael Cooley. Michael Cooley was born in 1934 in Tuam, County Galway. He was an aerospace engineer who emerged as an innovator in the field of human-centred, socially useful production. He was also an active trade unionist and was one of the pioneers of the now famous Lucas Workers Corporate Plan, whereby Lucas workers threatened with being laid off drew up their own plan for socially useful production. And the plan was published in 1976 but rejected by the Lucas management. It had a large impact on the workers' movement and in other circles, both in the UK and abroad. Through his work, Cooley pioneered the concept of human-centred systems to show how to avoid the misuse of new technologies which were taking root rapidly in the 1970s and 1980s. He was a co-founder of the journal AI and Society also. And in 1981, he received the Right Livelihood Award for designing and promoting the theory and practice of human-centred socially useful production. And that's an equivalent to the Nobel Prize. And the tenets of human-centred systems are to valorise tacit knowledge, so that uniquely human knowledge, to augment but not replace the work of the human in the system, to have socially beneficial production, and for the formation of a human-machine symbiosis. And in the lab, which is a participation action research lab, in order to valorise tacit knowledge, the technologies are co-evolved with the librarians, who have the power to accept, reject or request the technology. And we have worked very kiclosely with Peggy McHale, who was Special Collections Librarian but is now retired. And now we work very closely with Kieran and Terry and Gillian and Lisa as well in the library. The Cooley Special Collection is in the process of being digitised. It'll have a lot of material to be added to the Digital Repository of Ireland, so it'll be going the same route as Christina's material. And this will be made available also to Europeana, which is the European aggregator who makes it available as open and linked data on the semantic web. So it makes it freely available for people to access. And I feel sure that from a human-centred systems point of view, Michael Cooley himself would love what is happening here today with the Roses from the Heart project. What better example of a human-centred system and the use of human-machine symbiosis could we get than that of assisting Christina's work by using the technology to liberate the voices and tell the stories of the women of the Cascades factory to a worldwide audience on the web. And I'll leave you with a quote from Michael Cooley. He said, "Science and technology is not given. It was made by people like us. If it is not doing for us what we want, we have a right and a responsibility to change it." And so we at Insight Cooley wish Christina every success with the ongoing work that you're doing. And I just want to say thank you, Christina, for your speech earlier on. I'll just say thank you because words fail me, really. So, and the cúpla focal for the week that's in it, Gurv Mil Mag with Golair. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Brenda, for your kind words. And I know from when we spoke downstairs that you found today particularly emotional and powerful, so thank you for that. We have a couple more speakers, everyone, and thank you again for bearing with us. I'd now like to call on Liz Power, manager of the Waterford Women's Centre, to say a few words, please.
Can everyone hear me? Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Liz. I'm from the Waterford Women's Centre, so I'm the coordinator of the Waterford Women's Centre. Before I say anything, I would like to say that we are delighted to have been invited to be part of this event, and we'd like to thank everybody involved that made this event happen. I'm not going to even try and name everybody in the room because I think everybody plays an important part in making this event happen today. I've written it all down because I have a tendency to go off track, so I want to make sure I cover what I think we should cover from the Women's Centre. So the Roses from the Heart tribute, founded by Dr. Christina Henri, holds a very special place in the hearts and in our hearts. From the onset, it has resonated with the values of the Women's Centre and the ethos and ethics of the Women's Centre. The Women's Centre had the fortune about 8 years ago to be introduced to Christina Henri, and this truly inspired us. And I do believe I have it there, so I was right. I was actually worried that I didn't have that right, that Anne introduced, I think, Christina to Breda, and then Breda took up the mantle to make sure that it was possible to create the Bonnet Project. From this initial introduction, I think it was agreed that it would be fitting for us to work out how we could support local women here in Waterford to contribute to the Roses from the Heart collection. This resulted in the development of the Waterford Women's Centre Bonnet Project, supported by funding from the WWETB. So today we have most of the women, if not I think all of the women, from this year's Bonnet Project who took part and made a bonnet for each woman that they've dedicated their bonnet to this year. So thank you. I'd like to say thank you to the women who have made the bonnets this year, because they're the ones really that did all the work. And they were led by Anne Quinlan, who has been the facilitator this year for the Bonnet Project. Before Anne, it was Liz Heffernan. Where are you? Hey, Liz. So Liz led the women and facilitated that space as well. So thank you, Liz, too. It's collective what happens in the Women's Centre in terms of contributing to the Roses from the Heart tribute, and that wouldn't be possible without Kate over there as well. So Kate is our development coordinator in the Women's Centre, and she makes sure that everything runs smoothly, so that every woman is supported to achieve what they want to achieve in making their bonnet as well. Now I've gone off track. I said I wouldn't, but I did. And so it began, a group of women coming together each year on a Monday morning to make a bonnet in memory of a woman from Waterford who was sent to Australia as a convict all those many years ago. The Bonnet Project itself is facilitated using community education principles and practices through discovering the life stories of the women that the tribute is being made to. Many robust discussions around history take place in the Bonnet Project and in the Women's Centre, gender inequality and class being the premises behind a lot of those conversations. Many of the women taking part in the project reflect on their own personal circumstances and have shared that they feel, had they lived in those times, they too may have suffered the same fate, to be sent as a female convict to Van Diemen's Land. The bonnets made by the Bonnet Project participants form a significant part of our International Women's Day event every year, our celebrations, and we had that last Wednesday, which Christina thankfully joined us and spoke with us about as well, about the Roses from the Heart tribute. And we pay our respects to the women that these bonnets are made in memory of. The bonnets are then added to the wider International Roses from the Heart collection. So now, thankfully, as a result of the immense efforts and dedication of Dr. Christina Henri, the Roses from the Heart Waterford Group, and SETU, and I got that right, we can rest assured that these forgotten women are captured indefinitely in Irish and international history, and I think that's just massive. It's just amazing. We would like to thank all who have made this possible, and we look forward to continuing on this journey, because it is a journey. It's not static, so we're looking forward to next year having another 12 bonnets that we can contribute to the collection as well. So we'd like to thank everybody that's been involved in this process that has made this possible. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Liz. Thank you very much. Now we have our penultimate speaker for this afternoon, Pat McInerney from the Department of Computing and Mathematics here in SETU, also a member of the Insight Cooley Research Lab, and I think fair to say a friend of the library, as we like to say. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you very much, Terry. Those of you that know me know that I wear a couple of hats around here. So one of them is a photographer of digital cultural heritage material. That's my area of expertise. The other is a computer scientist. So I want to talk a little bit about the intersection of those two areas today. When Kieran asked me to talk for a few minutes, I kind of struggled with well, what do I say, for a few minutes. And, it can go one of two ways. One can be silenced, I think, by into submission by the enormous emotional weight of what's being done here. And I think some of that work we don't know about yet. It's only starting. Or, of course, I could talk all day about the systems design and the technologies and that we're only beginning to understand now in the context of artificial intelligence and what's coming down the line. It's really interesting. So I'll talk about two things briefly. First of all, how we handle the material, myself and Kieran. Not only in the technical decisions that I and our team made, and I want to just say right now, I'm not the only photographer in the room. We also have Dita Kieso-Rasmussen from Denmark, and she's been a great support to me and to us as well. But how we made those technical decisions about the quality and the veracity of the digital material. I'm a member of two UNESCO subcommittees, SIPA and ICOMOS, and we spend a lot of time thinking about international standards about how we do our work to make sure that it's as high as quality as possible, but it's also honest and getting to the truth of what we see. So we made decisions around the color calibration, that color management of what you see on the DRI will be as close to what we can get it to what we see in the bonnets. And that's a very important part of the technology around this work. But also how we, myself and Kieran, placed the bonnets as we were getting them ready for shot production. We would instinctively bring the bonnets into the Special Collections room around a boardroom table, and we set up the bonnets around as if they were members of the board. That's just an instinctive thing. It was drawing from that kind of human emotion around the liberation of these women, I think, is what we're in a way we're trying to do. So that was kind of really interesting. And we did that because the women were important, not for any other reasons. These women are important. The work of the women in the women's groups is important. And that came through in how we did our work in a very tangible way. But the second part of what I want to speak about is a little bit about the centrality of the image itself. So we're surrounded by images, whether they be pictures that we take, advertising, that we're saturated in imagery and image making, the phones, TV, and advertising. And when we look at an image, we create a relationship with the object of that image, whatever that is, a family member, a loved one. And we from the knowledge base in our minds, from our experience, we form a relationship with that. So this relationship can be semantically described. I mean, this is a rational relationship. We can describe these things in all sorts of ways that a machine can understand as well. There's a lot of power in that. With respect to Roses from the Heart, then, we can think of the image of the bonnets as a sort of a focal point that relates in a very general way to the past and the present, and that was mentioned before by a previous speaker. And it's critical really to our work as data scientists and people that work with technology. So the present, of course, being the creation of the bonnets, and this wonderful work that the women's groups are doing. And also the past, of course, being the relationship with the stories of these transported women. And the image is seen as a connecting point. But if we dig a little deeper into that relationship, that's a very surface relationship, past and present. If we dig a little deeper, we can bring forth, I think, discussions and discourses of memory and liberty, perhaps, as we extend that debate outward. And even history and freedom, the core concepts of a republic, indeed. So this is getting bigger and bigger as we proceed in our journey of how technology interfaces with all of these very human concepts. So we start to read an image in a much deeper way than just a thing. And when you look at these images, I want you to think about that. When you're looking at these images that we took of these bonnets and their different sides, think about what you're reading, those names, those things, those concepts, those bigger concepts that we're all trying to do, and the women and that made these bonnets and ourselves are trying to do. So this emergent process then, and I'm going to read this because it's quite dense, this emergent process really is the community voice. I want to raise that term today. There is a community voice here in the work of these women who made these beautiful bonnets, speaking through or for the transported women and the injustices that they suffered, being heard through the machinery of a repository like the Digital Repository of Ireland, effectively a state-funded site of democratic digital power. This is big stuff for us. We're data scientists. We don't do this very often. There's a huge opportunity here for us to explore these things. There's a huge literature around this that myself and Brenda are tying in with. So it's very important. It's almost a responsibility, I think, as data scientists, for us as university academics, computer scientists, human-centered systems engineers, to be a part of that important discussion, to drive that discussion, to take it away from the Zuckerbergs and the Musks and these people that have very different concept of what AI should be or what technology should be. We need to take it away from that. This is a case study in how we might approach that question. Okay, so Roses from the Heart is one such case study, and we take this, myself and Kieran and Brenda would probably take this on the road as we publish in the future internationally on this subject. We have a certain history in this regard. So we're going to take these concepts and run with them. So thank you to, special thanks to Dita, and of course to Christina and Kieran and Brenda for the privilege of being able to work on this incredibly important project, and may it go from strength to strength. Thank you very much.
Okay, folks, we're almost at an end now at this stage, and before I introduce our final speaker, I think we've done a lot of thanking, but one last time I do want to thank our keynote speaker, Christina Henri, for, I suppose, all her efforts and her, not just her keynote today, but for everything she's contributed to this project and for everything that she's obviously put her heart and soul into. So again, if you could put your hands together. Thanks, Pat, for your words of wisdom. I think Pat referred to quite a lot of what we might call in a university kind of high-end concepts, but knowing Pat and Brendan, the work they do, it's driven by two things: a human-centered approach and a kind of search for truth and social justice. So those underpin all those activities they're involved in. I want to offer you all some tea and coffee when we finish in a couple of minutes. I think you all deserve a cup of tea or coffee at this stage. And of course, at any stage, if you'd like to visit the exhibition downstairs, you're more than welcome. So again, on my own behalf, on behalf of the management team here in the library, Helen Hayden, David Kane, myself, VP for Student Experience, David Teneve, thank you so much. This has been a hugely inspiring event, and we're now going to end with the man who's made it all kind of come together today, and that's my colleague, Kieran Cronin. Thank you.
Thanks very much. And before we begin, I really should have taken down the group study area, but it's a bit late now. But thankfully, because of Photoshop and the wonders of technology in those photographs, that will no longer be there. But yeah, well, I suppose ultimately we're a library, and at our core and our ethos is the preservation of knowledge and the dissemination of information and knowledge to support our students and our staff in their research, in their studies, and in their lifelong learning. This has been an amazing event, and I think when I put the programme together with my colleagues in the Roses from the Heart group, we had quite a lot of speakers, and I'm sure people were thinking, my God, is this turning into a 2-day symposium? But we tried to actually, I think it was important that we had such a range of speakers, because this project has so much interconnected collaborations, and there's so much potential to this project, and it is an opportunity and so right that we get to celebrate Roses from the Heart, and I'm so delighted that Christina was here with us for this event. And for everyone who has given so freely of their time and their energy and their enthusiasm and so much more to make this project a reality. It wouldn't have happened without you, and I'm delighted that people got that accreditation today because it is so important. I say I'm delighted that we have so many bonnet makers here with us today. This truly is a community project, and the library is a community organisation. And Roses from the Heart, I don't see this as being the end. This is just the beginning, and it's a very exciting beginning. And today, launching the digital collection on the Digital Repository of Ireland is a very proud day for me. This is the first collection we've launched, the Digital Repository of Ireland. This is the national repository for the preservation of cultural heritage for Ireland. And I don't think there's no better platform than we can actually consider to host the images and of the beautiful images of the beautiful art that is that are the bonnets for future researchers and scholars and anyone would have an interest in the stories of the women from Waterford that were transported to Australia, to Van Diemen's Land in New South Wales. The next step is Europeana. This will bring the collection to the European audience, which is for preservation of cultural heritage, and I look forward to developing that. The collections are living records, so the story of each of the women, as we find out something new, the story of each person will be updated, it'll be added to. So the collection is not just stagnant in terms of when you print a book and it sits on the shelf and that is it until you do an update. These are live objects, live entities, they're live collections, so that they'll be constantly updated over time. And I think just one thing I'd like to conclude with is that, and it's an important thing to remember, is that our role is to ensure that these women who were forgotten their history will never be forgotten again. And through the work of the bonnet makers, to the Women's Centre, to the county groups and in the international organisations that Christina facilitates and coordinates right across the world, these women will never be forgotten about again. So thank you very much for your attention today, and I look forward to opening the exhibition now and welcome you down to see it. So thank you very much. So to conclude, again, Cathy, if you wouldn't mind playing one. Thank you so much. Your music has been absolutely amazing. And teas and coffees is next door in Oscars, and there's so please do partake in some of the hospitality before going down to view the exhibition. But please, no cups of tea down in the exhibition because you can appreciate this is art. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kieran. And to close out, I'm going to finish. I had thought I would play another air, but I'm going to close with a lullaby. And picking up on Christine talking about the women singing a lullaby. We've lots of choir people here now, so I expect to hear you have a go at the chorus. It's very simple. Hear the wind blow, love, hear the wind blow. Lean your head into the hand.